Quickly checking with Paula Reed, who's outside the courthouse who's getting details from our folks inside the courtroom. Paula, what are you hearing?
An extraordinary moment, Anderson. The former president was asked to stand and enter his own plea to the charges that have been filed against him. And I'm told he didn't even use the microphone. He just looked straight at the judge and projected his voice and entered a plea of not guilty. Now, again, at the hearing down in Florida, when he went through this in a federal courtroom down there, he had his lawyer enter that plea. So to hear him say that in his own voice is significant. Now the judge is reading the conditions of his release. You may remember that down in Florida, this is actually what delayed the hearing. But here she's saying that you must not violate state or federal law, and also that he cannot communicate with anyone known to be a witness about the case unless through a lawyer. Now, that could get tricky because, as we know, he's listed with 6 co-conspirators, many of whom are still close associates. So much like in the Mar-a-Lago documents case, the fact that so many people in his inner circle are caught up in this, that will likely be a difficult issue to navigate. Just looking really quickly to see if there are any other significant things from the judge. Yeah, she's reminding him that it is a crime to influence a juror or threaten a witness or retaliate against anyone else who provided information or otherwise obstruct justice. Of course, he has been charged with not only obstruction of justice, but obstructing his own alleged obstruction. So she's going through all of these standard things that you would go through with any defendant, but again, taking on a different significance with the former leader of the free world. We are told, again, by our colleague Hannah Rabinowitz, who's inside, he has agreed to all of these conditions. He has now sat down, and they are bringing the actual paperwork to his attorney.
All right, Paul, we'll check in with you shortly. Listen, did you have any doubt that the former president would show up in person to this?
You know, there's this kind of speculation within Trump's orbit, those who are still with him, that actually multiple indictments is better for him than one, and that they want to try to use this as they can in the PR space to try to boost his reelection. So I think because of that, he wanted to show up. He wants to be indignant. And, you know, on the sidelines of this, he's got amplifiers out giving press conferences, you know, talking about things like Hunter Biden that have nothing to do with this. And he's got folks on Capitol Hill defending him. But I do think that it's important to echo something Van said. To the degree that I know the former president, this is a sobering moment. There is going to be this moment that it sets in. This is happening again and is out of his hands. Things are out of his control in this moment and as this legal process carries out. And I think that we also have to remember this is a man with a lack of self-control. And that those words that he was just issued by the judge, you know, about what he's able to do, what he can do with witnesses, the jury, and so forth, that I think is when his attorneys start getting nervous because he tends to use his megaphone, say whatever he thinks. We know he's gone after and in some ways I would say intimidated Jack Smith. So I think it's also going to be notable to watch how he reacts after he leaves the courtroom, if he gets on his Truth Social and says what we expect him to.
Man?
Yeah, you know, in some ways, this would be a normal person's nightmare and maybe a narcissist's dream, to be martyred, for his cause, for his people, to have to go and face the establishment. I'm doing this for you, and then to be able to go back, he usually does some big rally or something. But at some point, I would imagine, this is just not the way that he thought it was going to work out. I think that when you run for office with, city council, class president, you have some idea it's going to be a good thing for you. And this is turning out to be something, quite different. I think the other thing is that if you listen to the other network that we never mentioned, it's the exact same storyline. It's just flipped. Everybody agrees that it's wrong for a president to abuse power to stay in office. I think I look at this, yes, it's wrong. Trump abused power to try to stay in office. But there's a reverse mirror world narrative that says, no, it's Biden abusing his power by sticking the DOJ on Trump so that Biden can stay in office. So Trump has been quite masterful at getting half the country now to go along with this delusion that he has that somehow he's the victim here when he's not.
Let's check in with Caitlin Collins outside the courthouse. Caitlin?
Yeah, Anderson, obviously we're learning more about this is going on. We are told, obviously, that the judge is doing as we expected here, not seeking any kind of pretrial detention. But Paula, as we are learning about what's happening here, the judge said that she has actually been she talked to Judge Chutkan, who's going to be the actual judge overseeing this entire case, about what the next steps are here and what a date could look like.
That's exactly right. And this was something we expected could happen, that Judge Chutkan would back channel and say, hey, this is when I would like you to set the next hearing, because you have all the parties there. So the judge here says, the magistrate judge says, with respect to moving forward, she's consulted with Judge Chutkan, and they have 3 dates that they've suggested: August 21st, August 22nd, and August 28th. Giving specific times. I mean, this is so procedural, right? But these little decisions, Caitlin, when they have this hearing over time, this adds up. Days turn into weeks, and this could be the difference between whether this gets tried before the election or not. So right now, the lawyers are talking about when they want to have their first hearing.
These 3 dates, I mean, August 23rd is the first debate in Milwaukee, the first Republican primary debate. Trump has said he's not going to that. But the idea that he could be in court again for this hearing, for this case, right before all of his opponents are on stage, is just notable in and of itself.
It is notable, and you make a great point, because if you look at the calendar for all the things that a potential Republican presidential candidate has to attend, has to do, the deadlines, the events, there's so much overlap with all the other legal issues that he is facing, right? He has a civil trial scheduled in January, another one scheduled next March. It's almost impossible to find a big chunk of the calendar where you can try to put a trial or anything else that doesn't in any way overlap with some of his activities as the presumptive Republican nominee. So we'll see which date they settle on, but this will be the first hearing before the judge overseeing the trial. It's unlikely that the former president will have to attend. He'll probably have the option, but it will be very procedural, all about scheduling, just like we saw in Florida. And while that's so mundane, right, setting the calendar, here it's so incredibly significant when so much of the defense strategy is delay, delay, delay.
Yeah, and so we'll see if the judge goes along with that. I want to bring in CNN's Evan Perez, who is just inside the courtroom. Evan, I mean, we're now learning that the judge has set and agreed with Trump's attorneys on August 28th, 2023 at 10 a.m. That is 5 days after the first Republican debate is going to happen in Milwaukee. We don't expect Trump to attend that. But, Evan, can you tell us what it was like inside the room?
Well, yeah, look, the former president, maybe it's the fact that this is his third time going through an arraignment. But his body language was, absolutely a lot different. I mean, he sat there with his hands clasped. He appeared displeased about something. There was something that the pretrial services official who was in the courtroom handed papers to his attorneys, to the Justice Department attorneys there, Tom Windham and John Lauro on Mr. Trump's side. And then they began discussing whatever it is in perhaps the bail package. That's typically the paperwork that he is handed, and then he is signing it. There was something in that paperwork that appeared to displease the former president, because he had a couple of seemed to be heated conversations with Todd Blanche, who was seated to his right. The former president mostly looked straight ahead. He looked around the room. There were a few times where he and he and Jack Smith looked at each other. It was absolutely more Jack Smith looking in his direction, but the former president, because of the vantage point, absolutely saw Jack Smith. There was also, it's a lot different from the one in Miami, from the hearing in Miami, where they didn't see each other during the entire hearing. One of the things that I think was interesting was the former president, you heard him just a few times. He said, yes, I do, when the judge asked him if he understood the charges, if he understood his right to remain silent. And of course, when he pleaded not guilty, he didn't speak directly into the microphone. He spoke directly ahead. The demeanor of the former president, it reminded me a lot of, during the presidential debates with Hillary Clinton, when candidate Clinton said something to get under his skin. That's the look he had on his face quite a few times as he sat there with his attorneys having some discussions, as he waited about 20 minutes for the judge to take her seat in the courtroom. So now we expect, obviously, as you guys have just been talking, that this is a case that's going to start moving a lot more quickly. absolutely more quickly than the one you saw in Miami. Again, a sharp difference. There was a lot of sharp differences between the two proceedings. Having been in the one in Miami, you could see how this one is going to shape up a lot differently. Guys?
And that's so notable, Evan. I mean, just fascinating to hear that perspective, what it's like to actually be inside the courtroom where Trump and Jack Smith are in the same room. Stand by. We'll get back to you, Paula. I know we're learning they set this date of August 28th, but the judges weighed in on whether or not Trump needs to be there, and also next steps for prosecutors here.
That's right. She's saying that the former president may be able to waive his appearance and not have to come back for this next hearing at the end of the month. But, Caitlin, it looks like there may be a rocket docket here because they have told the government that in the next 7 days they need to file a brief and they need to outline how much preparation they need to do for a possible trial. It's the same question that came up in Florida, but this is moving along a lot faster. Then she wants defense attorneys to weigh in too. And there's a lot that goes into the answer to that question. How much time will it take you to go through discovery, to share it with the defense? But we know the special counsel, Jack Smith, has said he wants a, quote, speedy trial. Now, the defense attorneys, they are going to want to delay this as long as possible. But this is a pretty tight turnaround in terms of wanting to get this answer. Down in Florida, it took about a month before they were able to settle on this answer. So this appears to me moving along quickly. And this is what we expected from Judge Chutkan. We expected that she was going to try to move this along pretty quickly.